welcome. Tonight, or whenever you find yourself listening, we embark on a very long, very detailed, and hopefully very calming journey through a period of human history known as the Iron Age. This is a time of profound transformation, a shift from the preceding Bronze Age, marked by the widespread adoption of iron for tools, weapons, and everyday objects. It's a period that spans different timelines across the globe, beginning in some regions as early as the 12th century BCE, and in others much later, sometimes even into the Common Era. We will explore its origins, its gradual spread, the diverse cultures it shaped, and the lasting legacy it left behind. Our aim is to delve into the minutiae, to understand the intricate processes, the subtle nuances of daily lives, and the profound societal shifts that defined this era. We will take our time, allowing each detail to unfold slowly, like the quiet passage of time itself. Before we delve deeper into the intricate details of ancient metallurgy and societal shifts, I invite you, if you feel so inclined, to take a moment. Perhaps you could comment below if you're watching this on a platform that allows for such interaction, and simply tell us how your day has been. Was it calm? Was it busy? Was it filled with quiet contemplation or bustling activity? And perhaps, if you're feeling reflective, what is one small goal or even a grand aspiration that you hope to achieve in the coming days, weeks, or even years? There's no pressure, of course, just an open invitation to share a quiet thought, a small reflection on your own journey. Now, let us begin our slow descent into the Iron Age. The Iron Age, as a concept, represents a truly significant technological and cultural shift in the long and winding narrative of human development. For millennia, humanity had relied on a progression of materials for its most advanced tools and weaponry. The vast expanse of the Stone Age, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years, saw the gradual development of increasingly sophisticated tools crafted from flint, obsidian, chert, quartzite, and other hard stones. These tools were shaped through various techniques, including knapping, striking flakes off a core, grinding and polishing, creating everything from hand axes and spear points to grinding stones and early agricultural implements. The limitations of stone, however, were inherent. It was brittle, difficult to shape precisely, and could not be easily repaired or recycled. Then came the Copper Age, or Chalcolithic period, a transitional phase where the malleability of native copper was discovered. Early metalworkers learned to cold hammer copper into rudimentary tools and ornaments. Later they discovered that copper could be melted and cast, a truly revolutionary insight. This was followed by the Bronze Age, a period defined by the widespread use of bronze, an alloy primarily of copper and tin. Bronze was, in its time, a truly revolutionary material. It was significantly harder and more durable than pure copper, making it far more effective for tools and weapons. Crucially, it could be melted at relatively low temperatures, typically around 950 degrees Celsius, and cast into intricate shapes, using molds made of stone or clay. This allowed for the mass production of standardized items in complex artistic forms, from elaborate swords and shields to finely detailed figurines and vessels. Bronze held an edge better than pure copper and could be repeatedly sharpened. However, the production of bronze presented inherent and significant challenges. The raw materials, copper and especially tin, were often scarce and geographically localized. Copper deposits were found in various regions, such as Cyprus, Anatolia, and parts of Central Europe. But tin, the essential hardening agent, was found in only a few specific and often distant regions, such as Cornwall in Britain, parts of Central Europe, like the Erzgebirge Mountains, and Afghanistan. This geographical scarcity necessitated the establishment and maintenance of extensive and complex long-distance trade networks. These networks, in turn, fostered the development of complex societies, powerful trading elites, and sophisticated maritime and overland routes that spanned continents. The control over these vital resources and the lucrative trade routes often led to immense wealth accumulation, political power, and, inevitably, interstate conflict. The Bronze Age was, in many ways, an age of interconnected empires and kingdoms, deeply reliant on the consistent flow of these precious metals, a system that was both robust and, ultimately, fragile. But then came iron. Iron ore is remarkably abundant across the globe, far more so than copper or tin. It is found in various forms, such as hematite, red iron ore, limonite, brown iron ore, and magnetite, black iron ore, in almost every continent and in many local environments, sometimes even as bog iron, which could be easily collected from marshy areas. This widespread availability meant that communities could potentially access the raw material much closer to home, reducing their reliance on distant trade routes and the powerful entities that controlled them for essential tools and weapons. This local accessibility of iron offered a pathway to greater self-sufficiency for many communities, a significant shift from the centralized control of bronze resources. However, working with iron presented its own unique and formidable challenges that were fundamentally different from those encountered with bronze. Iron has a much higher melting point than bronze, approximately 1538 degrees Celsius for pure iron, compared to around 950 degrees Celsius for typical bronze. This made it exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, to melt and cast iron using the ancient technologies available for bronze, which relied on simple open hearths or small furnaces that could not reach such high temperatures. Instead, early iron working involved a process called bloomery smelting. This method did not aim to melt the iron entirely. It involved heating iron ore in a specially constructed furnace with charcoal to a temperature below its melting point, typically between 1,000 and 1,200 degrees Celsius. This process produced a spongy, semi-solid mass of iron particles interspersed with molten slag, impurities from the ore. This mass was known as a bloom. This bloom then had to be repeatedly hammered while hot to expel the impurities and consolidate the iron, a laborious, physically demanding, and highly skilled process. The bloomery process was inherently inefficient in terms of material yield, as a significant portion of the iron could be lost in the slag, but it was the only viable way to produce usable iron before the advent of more advanced blast furnaces, which would come much later, notably in China. The transition from bronze to iron was not sudden or uniform. It was a gradual, often protracted process, varying significantly from one region to another, sometimes taking centuries. In many regions, bronze continued to be used alongside iron for a considerable period. Bronze remained preferred for prestige items, intricate ornaments, and even some tools where its casting properties were advantageous, such as elaborate vessels, finely detailed figurines, or ceremonial weapons. Iron initially was often seen as a lesser metal, perhaps even a novelty, or simply a cheaper, more accessible alternative when bronze was scarce. Its true potential, its superior hardness, durability, and ability to hold a sharper edge when properly worked and carbonized, was gradually discovered and exploited through persistent experimentation, refinement of techniques, and the accumulation of metallurgical knowledge passed down through generations of smiths. The earliest evidence for iron smelting and working dates back to the Hittite Empire in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, around the 14th century BCE. The Hittites appear to have guarded their knowledge of ironworking, treating it as a valuable state secret, perhaps even a royal monopoly. Iron was a rare and precious commodity in their empire, often exchanged as diplomatic gifts between rulers, indicating its high value and limited production. However, with the dramatic and widespread collapse of major Bronze Age civilizations around 1200 BCE, a tumultuous period often referred to as the Late Bronze Age collapse, knowledge of ironworking began to diffuse more widely. This collapse was characterized by widespread societal breakdown, mass migrations, invasions by mysterious sea peoples, and the severe disruption of established trade routes that had sustained the Bronze Age empires. As empires crumbled and long-distance trade in scarce bronze resources became unreliable or impossible, the reliance on locally available iron became a practical necessity for many communities. Iron, with its ubiquitous presence, offered a viable and accessible alternative for tool and weapon production, even if its initial quality was inferior to well-made bronze. This period of crisis inadvertently spurred the widespread adoption of iron as communities sought self-sufficiency in a fragmented world. Let us now turn our attention to Europe, where the Iron Age unfolded in distinct phases and cultures, each leaving its unique archaeological signature and contributing to the rich tapestry of ancient European history. In Central Europe, the early Iron Age is largely defined by the Hallstatt culture, named after the eponymous archaeological site of Hallstatt in the Salzkammergut region of Austria. This culture flourished from approximately 800 BCE to 450 BCE. The site of Hallstatt itself is famous for its extensive and ancient salt mines, which had been exploited since the Neolithic period. These salt mines provided immense wealth to the local population, allowing them to engage in extensive long-distance trade networks that stretched across Europe. Salt was an incredibly vital commodity in the ancient world, essential for food preservation, particularly meat and fish, and as a valuable trade good in its own right. The control of salt resources conferred significant economic and political power upon the Hallstatt elite, enabling them to accumulate luxury goods and maintain their status. The mining process itself was arduous, involving the use of bronze and later iron pickaxes, wooden shovels, and leather bags to extract the salt from deep underground galleries illuminated by simple oil lamps. The Hallstatt culture is characterized by its distinctive burial practices, which provide invaluable insights into their social structure, beliefs, and material culture. Elite burials, particularly those from the early phases, often featured elaborate four-wheeled wagons, richly decorated, bronze vessels, and increasingly iron weaponry. These wagon burials, found in large tumuli, burial mounds, across the Hallstatt heartland, suggest a society with a clear and pronounced social hierarchy, where powerful chieftains or aristocrats held significant influence and accumulated considerable wealth. The wagons themselves were not merely symbolic. They were functional vehicles indicating a degree of mobility, perhaps for trade, travel, or even military purposes. The presence of horse harnesses and other equestrian gear further supports this interpretation of a mobile and possibly warrior-oriented elite. Grave goods often included finely crafted bronze situli, buckets for wine or water, large cauldrons, and elaborate fibulae, brooches used to fasten clothing, alongside iron swords and spearheads, indicating a blend of traditional bronze prestige, items with the new iron technology. The iron artifacts from Hallstatt sites demonstrate a growing mastery of the new metal. Swords, for instance, evolved from their Bronze Age predecessors. Early Hallstatt swords were often still made of bronze, but gradually iron swords became more common. These early iron swords were typically shorter and broader than later Iron Age swords, often leaf-shaped, designed for both thrusting and slashing. Some featured distinctive antennae hilts, where the pommel curved outwards like antennae, a characteristic Hallstatt design. The smiths of Hallstatt were skilled in forging iron, creating durable and effective blades, though the quality could vary depending on the smith's expertise and the quality of the ore. Beyond weaponry, iron was increasingly used for agricultural tools, Iron sickles, plowshares, axes, adzes, and hoes would have significantly improved agricultural efficiency, allowing for larger harvests and supporting a growing population. The impact of these more durable and effective tools on daily life cannot be overstated. A more resilient iron axe meant easier forest clearing for new fields. A more efficient iron plow meant more land could be cultivated with less effort, leading to greater food security and surplus, which in turn supported population growth and the development of more complex social structures. Pottery from the Hallstatt period is often decorated with geometric patterns, sometimes incised into the clay before firing, sometimes painted with mineral pigments in red or black. The forms of the vessels were primarily functional, designed for storage of grains and liquids, cooking over an open fire, and serving food. While perhaps not as visually striking as some later Iron Age art, the pottery provides valuable insights into domestic life, culinary practices, and artistic sensibilities. Textile production, evidenced by numerous spindle whorls and loom weights found at settlement sites, was also a common domestic activity, producing wool and linen fabrics. Settlements during the Hallstatt period varied in size and defensive capabilities. Some were open villages, often located near fertile land or water sources, consisting of clusters of timber-framed houses. Others were fortified hillforts, strategically located on elevated ground for defensive purposes. These hillforts, though perhaps not as massive or complex as later Iron Age oppida, demonstrate a clear concern for security and a capacity for organized communal labor. The construction of ramparts, often made of earth and timber, and surrounding ditches would have required significant planning and coordinated effort from the community. These hill forts served as refuges in times of conflict and sometimes as centers for local administration or trade, controlling access to resources or routes. Trade networks during the Hallstatt period extended across vast swathes of Europe. Amber, a fossilized tree resin, was a highly prized commodity originating from the Baltic Sea region and traded southwards along established routes, sometimes referred to as the Amber Road. This precious material was used for jewelry and ornaments. Mediterranean goods, such as fine Greek pottery, e.g. Attic black figure ware, Etruscan bronze vessels, like large craters for mixing wine, and even early forms of wine also found their way into Hallstatt territories, indicating robust connections with the burgeoning Greek city-states and the Etruscan civilization in Italy. These trade routes were not just pathways for goods, they were also conduits for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and cultural influences, leading to a dynamic interplay between different European regions. The wealth generated from salt and trade allowed the Hallstatt elite to acquire these prestigious foreign goods, further cementing their status. The social structure of the Hallstattic culture appears to have been hierarchical, with a distinct warrior elite at the top. Evidence from burials suggests that status was often inherited, with rich grave goods accompanying individuals from a young age, indicating a hereditary aristocracy. This elite likely controlled land, resources, and labor, and led in warfare. Below them were common farmers, herders, and specialized craftspeople. The presence of specialized craftspeople, such as smiths, potters, and jewelers, indicates a degree of economic specialization within these communities, moving beyond simple subsistence farming. These artisans often lived in close proximity to the elite, serving their needs. The religious beliefs of the Hallstatt people are less well understood, as they left no written records. However, archaeological evidence suggests a reverence for nature, particularly water sources like springs, rivers, and lakes, which were often considered sacred. Offerings of valuable objects, including bronze and iron artifacts, have been found in these watery contexts, suggesting ritualistic depositions to deities or spirits associated with these natural features. There is also evidence of a belief in an afterlife, as indicated by the elaborate burial rituals and the inclusion of grave goods intended for use in the next world. Animal sacrifice was likely part of their rituals, with animal bones found at cult sites. As we slowly move through the Hallstatt period, we observe the gradual consolidation of iron technology. It was a time of experimentation, of learning the properties of this new metal, and of adapting existing social structures to accommodate its widespread use. The Hallstatt culture, with its focus on salt wealth and established trade routes, slowly gave way to new artistic styles and societal organizations, laying many of the foundations for the subsequent developments of the Iron Age in Europe. The transition from the Hallstatt to the next major European Iron Age culture, the Latin culture, was not abrupt. There was an overlap, a period of gradual change and influence, where Hallstatt traditions slowly merged with or were superseded by new cultural expressions, particularly in the artistic sphere, as new ideas diffused across the continent. Let us take a moment to absorb the quiet details of this early phase. The slow, deliberate hammering of the bloom, the careful shaping of the iron, the quiet hum of a village, the rustle of crops in the field, the distant sound of a wagon wheel turning on a dirt track. These were the sounds and sights of the early Iron Age in Central Europe. Following the Hallstatt period, roughly from 450 BCE to the 1st century BCE, we enter the era of the Latin culture. This culture is often associated with the peoples we now refer to as the Celts, though Celtic is a broad linguistic and cultural term that encompasses many distinct groups and tribes who shared common linguistic roots and cultural traits. The Latin culture originated in the same general region as Hallstatt in Central Europe, particularly in areas of modern-day Switzerland, France, and Germany, but it spread much more widely. Its influence extended across vast swaths of Western, Central, and Eastern Europe, including parts of Britain and Ireland, and even into parts of Anatolia, modern Turkey, through significant migrations where they became known as the Galatians. The defining characteristic of the Latin culture is its distinctive curvilinear art style. Unlike the more geometric and angular patterns of Hallstatt, Latin art is fluid, abstract, and often incorporates highly stylized animal and human forms, sometimes so abstract that they are barely recognizable, merging into intricate patterns. This art can be found on a wide range of objects: elaborate metalwork, bronze, gold, and increasingly iron, pottery, and even carved stone. The intricate swirling patterns, often asymmetrical and dynamic, are instantly recognizable. Techniques included repoussé, hammering from the reverse side to create a raised design, engraving, openwork, and the innovative use of enamel, particularly vibrant red enamel, to add striking color to metal objects. This artistic flourish suggests a society with a sophisticated aesthetic sense, a rich symbolic language, and highly skilled artisans who mastered complex metalworking techniques. Examples include elaborate torques, neck rings, often made of gold or bronze, intricately decorated helmets, sword scabbards, large ceremonial shields like the Battersea Shield from the Thames, and polished bronze mirrors with engraved designs. The art often features zoomorphic motifs, stylized birds, horses, boars, serpents, and anthropomorphic elements. Human faces, often disembodied or highly abstracted, sometimes with large staring eyes. Iron technology continued to advance significantly. During the Latin period, smiths became even more adept at working iron, producing longer, more flexible, and more resilient swords, often with elaborate and beautifully crafted hilts made of organic materials like wood or bone, sometimes inlaid with enamel. The development of pattern welding, a highly advanced technique, became more common and refined. This involved forging together strips of different types of iron and steel, often alternating between high-carbon steel for hardness and low-carbon iron for flexibility. Twisting them and then repeatedly folding and hammering them together. This process created a composite blade with exceptional strength, flexibility, and a visually appealing swirling pattern on the surface reminiscent of wood grain. This technique not only improved the functionality of weapons, but also added an artistic and prestigious dimension, making such blades highly prized and often reserved for elite warriors. Agricultural tools also saw significant improvements. Iron plowshares became more common and efficient, allowing for deeper tilling of the soil and increasing agricultural productivity. Scythes, sickles, axes, hoes, and various other farming implements made of iron would have further boosted agricultural output, supporting larger populations and more complex social structures. Specialized iron tools for various crafts such as woodworking, chisels, saws, planes, leatherworking, awls, knives, and even fine metal working also became more prevalent, indicating a growing specialization of labor and a more sophisticated economy. Latin settlements varied in size and function. Many were open villages, often clustered around fertile agricultural land. However, the period is also known for its impressive oppida. These were large, fortified settlements often built on hilltops or other strategically advantageous locations, serving as economic, political, and religious centers. Oppida could encompass vast areas, sometimes hundreds of acres, and were protected by massive ramparts and ditches. A distinctive defensive feature was the murum gallicum, Gallic wall, a complex construction of timber, earth, and stone, designed to be resistant to fire and battering rams. The construction of these oppida required immense communal effort, sophisticated engineering, and centralized planning, indicating a high degree of social organization and political authority. Notable examples include Manching in Germany, one of the largest, covering over 380 hectares with evidence of extensive workshops. Bibract in France, the capital of the Ayadoui tribe, a major political and economic center, later visited by Julius Caesar, and Maiden Castle in Britain, a massive hill fort with complex multi-valet earthworks. Within these oppida, specialized workshops would have existed, where smiths, potters, weavers, jewelers, and other craftspeople plied their trades. Evidence of large-scale production, such as numerous pottery kilns or vast slag heaps from iron working, has been found at these sites, indicating industrial-level output for the time. The presence of coinage, which began to be minted in the later Latin period, further indicates the development of complex economies and sophisticated trade networks. These coins, often crude imitations of Greek or Roman prototypes, like Macedonian tetradrachms or Roman denarii, sometimes featured distinctive Latin artistic motifs such as stylized horses, human heads, or abstract patterns. They facilitated trade, the payment of mercenaries, and the accumulation of wealth, moving beyond simple barter systems. Social structure in Latene societies appears to have been complex and hierarchical, with a powerful warrior aristocracy, a revered priestly class, the Druids, as described by Roman authors, and a common populace of farmers, artisans, and laborers. There is also evidence of slavery, often of captives taken in warfare or individuals who fell into debt. The warrior elite, often distinguished by their elaborate weaponry, fine clothing, and rich grave goods, held political power, led in battle, and controlled significant resources. The Druids, in particular, held significant power and influence, acting as religious leaders, judges, teachers, healers, and advisors to chieftains. Their knowledge, encompassing law, history, astronomy, and theology, was passed down orally through generations, and they played a central role in the spiritual and intellectual life of the communities, often mediating disputes and performing elaborate rituals. Warfare was a prominent feature of the Latin period, as evidenced by numerous archaeological finds of weapons and fortifications and by Roman accounts. The Celts were renowned warriors, often fighting with great ferocity and a distinctive battle style, sometimes even naked or painted for battle to intimidate their enemies. Their weaponry included long iron swords, often over 70 centimeters, designed for slashing, spears, javelins, and large, often elaborately decorated wooden shields, sometimes reinforced with iron bosses and spines. Some elite warriors wore chainmail armor, a complex and expensive form of protection that required immense metallurgical skill to produce. Chariots were also used in warfare, particularly in Britain, serving as mobile firing platforms for javelins, and for rapid troop deployment and psychological impact on the battlefield. The accounts of Roman authors, such as Julius Caesar in his commentaries on the Gallic War, provide valuable, though biased and often propagandistic, insights into Celtic military practices, social organization, and political rivalries between tribes. Trade networks continued to be vital and expanded significantly, particularly with the burgeoning Roman Republic. Latin communities traded with their neighbors and with the Mediterranean world. Goods exchanged included iron, salt, amber, slaves, agricultural products, grain, livestock, and raw materials like timber, furs, and hides. In return, they received Mediterranean luxuries such as fine Italian wine, evidenced by vast quantities of Roman amphorae found at Celtic sites, olive oil, fine pottery, e.g. Campanian ware, and bronze vessels. The discovery of these Roman imports at Latine sites indicates the extent and sophistication of these trade connections, which often followed established river systems and ancient overland tracks. Religious practices involved offerings to deities, often in natural settings like sacred groves, springs, lakes, and bogs. These watery places were seen as liminal spaces, connecting the human world with the divine. Votive offerings ranging from valuable metalwork, swords, shields, torques, to human and animal sacrifices have been found in these contexts, suggesting ritualistic depositions to deities or spirits associated with these natural features. The veneration of heads, both human and animal, appears to have been a significant aspect of their belief system, with carved stone heads and depictions of heads appearing frequently in their art and architecture. This head cult may have symbolized power, divinity, or the soul, and severed heads of enemies were sometimes displayed as trophies, reflecting a warrior ethos. The spread of the Latin culture was not solely through conquest. It also occurred through migration, trade, and cultural diffusion. Celtic groups migrated into various parts of Europe, including Italy, where they famously sacked Rome in 390 BCE, and into the Balkans and Anatolia, where they became known as the Galatians. These migrations often involved significant cultural exchange and sometimes conflict with existing populations, leading to a complex mosaic of interactions and the formation of new cultural identities. The end of the Latin period in much of continental Europe was marked by the relentless expansion of the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul in the mid-1st century BCE brought an end to the independence of many Celtic tribes, leading to their gradual Romanization, the adoption of Roman language, customs, and administration. In Britain, the Roman conquest followed later, in the 1st century CE. However, in Ireland and parts of Scotland, the Iron Age continued for a longer period, as these regions were not subjected to Roman rule, preserving distinct Celtic traditions and developing their own unique Iron Age trajectories, often referred to as the Insular Iron Age, which saw the flourishing of early Christian art and monasticism. The legacy of the Latin culture is immense. Its artistic style continues to inspire artists and designers today, and its societal structures laid the groundwork for later European developments. The Celts, though often depicted as fierce barbarians by the Romans, were a sophisticated people. With a rich culture, advanced craftsmanship, complex social organization, and a profound spiritual connection, to their environment. Let us pause for a moment to consider the quiet hum of the oppidum, the rhythmic clang of the smith's hammer, the rustle of leaves in a sacred grove, and the slow, deliberate strokes of a potter shaping clay. These were the sounds and sensations of the Latin Iron Age. While Europe experienced its distinct Iron Age developments, the adoption and impact of iron technology were unfolding simultaneously and sometimes even earlier in other parts of the world. The story of the Iron Age is truly global, with each region presenting its own unique narrative of innovation, adaptation, and societal change. Let us first turn our attention to the Near East, the cradle of civilization, and, as we noted earlier, the likely origin point for iron metallurgy. The Hittite Empire in Anatolia was among the first to master ironworking, though its widespread use was limited and often reserved for elite items, perhaps due to the difficulty of production and the secrecy surrounding the technology. Iron was a rare and precious commodity in their empire, often exchanged as diplomatic gifts between rulers, indicating its high value and limited production. The collapse of the Hittite Empire and other major Bronze Age powers around 1200 BCE, a period of widespread disruption, paradoxically facilitated the diffusion of iron technology. As the complex trade networks for bronze materials broke down, the local availability of iron became a crucial advantage, leading to its more widespread adoption by various successor states and emerging kingdoms across the region. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, which dominated Mesopotamia and the Levant from the 9th to the 7th centuries BCE, was a major consumer and producer of iron. The Assyrians, known for their formidable military machine and their relentless expansion, used iron extensively for military purposes, equipping their vast armies with iron swords, spearheads, arrowheads, and even iron scales for armor, providing a significant technological edge over adversaries still relying on bronze. Their sophisticated siege engines, such as battering rams and siege towers, and massive fortifications also incorporated iron components, making them more durable and effective. The sheer scale of their iron production suggests a highly organized, possibly state-controlled, industry with specialized workshops, a consistent supply chain for ore and charcoal, and a large workforce, perhaps even including enslaved laborers. Iron was not just for warfare, it was also used for agricultural tools, construction, e.g., iron clamps for masonry blocks in monumental architecture, and even some decorative items. The Assyrian capital of Khorsabad, for example, yielded numerous iron artifacts, including tools and architectural elements, demonstrating the pervasive use of the metal in their imperial infrastructure. Further south, in the Levant, the Iron Age saw the emergence of various independent kingdoms, including Israel and Judah. Archaeological evidence from sites like Megiddo, Lachish, and Gezer reveals the increasing use of iron tools for farming and construction. Iron plowshares, hoes, and axes would have been instrumental in developing the agricultural potential of the region, allowing for more intensive cultivation and supporting growing populations. The biblical narratives, though not strictly historical, documents reflect a society where iron was becoming increasingly common, particularly for agricultural implements, symbolizing prosperity and technological advancement. The Philistines, a sea people who settled in the southern Levant, are also associated with early ironworking in the region, possibly playing a role in its diffusion. The Persian Empire, which succeeded the Assyrians and Babylonians in the 6th century BCE, also made extensive use of iron. Their vast empire, stretching from Greece to India, facilitated the continued spread of iron technology and trade across an unprecedented geographical area. Persian ironworking was highly developed, producing not only weapons for their immense armies, but also intricate tools, domestic implements, and decorative objects. The Achaemenid Persians were masters of logistics and resource management, ensuring a steady supply of iron for their imperial needs, from military campaigns to monumental building projects like Persepolis. Moving into Africa, the Iron Age developed independently in several regions, demonstrating indigenous innovation rather than solely diffusion from the Near East. One of the most significant early Iron Age cultures in West Africa is the Nok culture of present-day Nigeria. Dating from around 1000 BCE to 300 CE, the Nok culture is renowned for its distinctive terracotta sculptures, which are among the earliest known examples of figurative art in sub-Saharan Africa. These sculptures, often depicting human and animal, figures with elaborate hairstyles, jewelry, and expressive faces, are characterized by their stylized features and often triangular eyes. Crucially, the Nok people were also skilled ironworkers. Evidence of iron smelting furnaces, large quantities of slag, the glassy waste product of smelting, and clay tuyères, pipes used to blow air into the furnace, has been found at numerous Nok sites. This indicates that they independently developed or acquired the knowledge of iron metallurgy possibly as early as the first millennium BCE, making them one of the earliest iron-producing cultures in Africa. Their iron tools would have been essential for agriculture in the dense forests of West Africa, allowing for efficient land clearing, cultivation of crops like yams and millet, and the development of more settled agricultural communities. The Ihwa relationship between the terracotta art and the ironworking is still debated, but it highlights a sophisticated society with both artistic and technological prowess. Further south, in the region of present-day Sudan, the kingdom of Meroe, EC 800. BCE 350 CE became a major center of iron production. Meroe, located on the Nile River, had abundant iron ore deposits in its vicinity and vast forests that provided the necessary charcoal for smelting. The sheer quantity of slag heaps found at Meroitic sites, particularly at the capital city of Meroe, suggests industrial-scale iron production, leading some scholars to refer to it as the Birmingham of Africa. These slag heaps, some reaching several meters high, are a testament to the intensity of their iron production. Meroitic iron was used for tools, weapons, and possibly for trade with neighboring regions, contributing significantly to the kingdom's wealth and power. The Meroitic pyramids, though smaller than their Egyptian predecessors, stand as a testament to their architectural capabilities, likely aided by durable iron tools for quarrying and shaping stone. The Meroitic script, derived from Egyptian hieroglyphs, also developed during this period, indicating a literate and organized society. The spread of iron technology across sub-Saharan Africa was a gradual process, often associated with the migrations of Bantu-speaking peoples. As these groups moved across the continent, they carried with them the knowledge of iron smelting and advanced farming techniques. This diffusion of iron technology had a profound impact on the demographic and cultural landscape of Africa, enabling agricultural expansion into new environments, supporting the growth of larger, more complex societies, and facilitating the development of new economic and political structures. The ability to clear land more efficiently and produce more food allowed for population growth and the establishment of permanent settlements. Now, let us journey eastward to Asia. In India, the Iron Age began around 1200 BCE in some regions, particularly in the Gangetic Plains, though its widespread adoption occurred later. The Vedic texts, ancient Hindu scriptures, mention iron, referred to as ayas, or shama ayas, meaning dark metal, indicating its presence and use in early Indian society. Archaeological sites like Atranjikara, Hastinapura, and various painted gray ware sites have yielded early iron artifacts, including tools and weapons, providing tangible evidence of its increasing use and integration into daily life. The adoption of iron in India had a profound impact on agriculture, particularly in the dense, alluvial forests of the Ganges Basin. Iron axes and plowshares facilitated the clearing of land and the expansion of cultivation into previously unmanageable areas, leading to increased food production and significant population growth. This agricultural surplus in turn supported the emergence of larger settlements, urban centers, and early states known as Mahajanapadas around the 6th century BCE. These early Indian empires, such as Magadha, relied on iron for their military strength, equipping their armies with superior weapons, and for their economic prosperity, driven by agricultural surplus and trade. Indian ironworkers were highly skilled, eventually developing advanced techniques for producing high-quality steel, famously known as wootz steel or crucible steel. This steel, produced by melting wrought iron with carbonaceous material in a sealed crucible, often made of clay and charcoal, resulted in a material of exceptional hardness, sharpness, and resilience, which would later be exported and admired across the ancient world, forming the basis for legendary Damascus swords. The process involved precise control of temperature and carbon content, a testament to their metallurgical expertise, and was a precursor to modern steelmaking. Finally, let us consider China. The Iron Age in China began relatively later than in the Near East or India, around the 8th century BCE, during the Eastern Zhou dynasty. However, Chinese iron technology quickly surpassed that of the West in one crucial aspect, the development of cast iron. While Western ironworking focused on wrought iron, hammered from a bloom, Chinese metallurgists, perhaps due to the specific properties of their iron ores, which often contained phosphorus, lowering the melting point, and the availability of high-quality charcoal, discovered how to produce cast iron, which has a much lower melting point, around 1150 to 1200 degrees Celsius, and can be poured into molds. This allowed for the mass production of standardized tools, weapons, and even intricate decorative objects, a capability not seen in the West until much later, during the European Middle Ages, the development of a blast. Furnaces in China capable of reaching and maintaining higher temperatures than bloomery furnaces was key to their mastery of cast iron. These furnaces, often large and sophisticated, with forced air supplied by powerful bellows, sometimes water-powered, could produce molten iron continuously, a significant advantage over the batch process of bloomery smelting. The Warring States period 475-21 BCE saw the widespread use of cast iron for agricultural tools such as plowshares, hoes, and spades, which significantly boosted agricultural output and supported the massive armies of the competing states. Iron weapons, though often made of cast iron, which can be brittle, were also produced in large quantities, often by casting and then annealing, a heat-treating process to reduce brittleness and improve toughness. The Qin dynasty, which unified China in 221 BCE, relied heavily on iron technology for its military strength and its ambitious infrastructure projects, including the construction of sections of the Great Wall and vast irrigation systems. The ability to mass-produce standardized iron tools and weapons gave Chinese states a significant technological and logistical advantage in their quest for unification and imperial control. As we reflect on these diverse Iron Age narratives across the globe, we see common threads: the transformative power of a new material, the ingenuity of human adaptation, and the profound impact on agriculture, warfare, and social organization. Yet we also observe unique regional developments reflecting distinct cultural priorities, available resources, and technological pathways. The global Iron Age was a mosaic of innovation and diffusion, each piece contributing to the larger picture of human progress and the shaping of distinct civilizations. Let us take a moment to imagine the quiet clang of a Meroitic furnace, the rhythmic chipping of a Knox sculptor, the steady plowing of a field in the Ganges plain, and the precise pouring of molten iron in a Chinese foundry. These were the quiet yet powerful activities that shaped the Iron Age across continents. Having explored the geographical and cultural spread of the Iron Age, let us now delve deeper into specific aspects that defined this transformative era. We will focus on the intricate technological processes, the nuances of daily life, the evolving social structures, and the enduring legacy of iron. Let us begin with a more detailed look at iron metallurgy, the very heart of the Iron Age. As mentioned, the primary method for producing iron in the early and middle Iron Age, particularly outside of China, was the bloomery furnace. This was a relatively simple structure, often a clay shaft furnace, typically no more than a meter or two high, sometimes built into a hillside for stability and insulation or as a freestanding structure. The construction involved local clay, often mixed with straw or sand for strength, sometimes reinforced with stones or timber, and often featured a tap hole at the bottom for slag removal or a removable front section for bloom extraction. The process began with the meticulous preparation of the raw materials. Iron ore, usually in the form of hematite or limonite, was collected, often from surface deposits, shallow open pit mines, or bog iron deposits, which were relatively easy to access. This ore was then typically roasted or calcined in a large bonfire or simple kiln to remove moisture, break down carbonates, and make it more brittle, facilitating crushing into smaller, more manageable pieces. The crushed ore was then mixed with charcoal, which served as both the fuel to generate the necessary heat and, crucially, as a reducing agent. Charcoal itself was produced through the slow burning of wood in a low-oxygen environment, a specialized and laborious process often carried out by colliers in forested areas requiring significant amounts of timber. When charcoal burns in a limited oxygen environment within the furnace, it produces carbon monoxide, which chemically reacts with the iron oxides in the ore, stripping away the oxygen atoms and leaving behind metallic iron. Air was supplied to the furnace through ceramic nozzles called tuyères, which were inserted into the base or side of the furnace, directing the airflow into the heart of the burning charcoal and ore mixture. These tuyères were connected to bellows, which were often made of animal hides, like goatskin or cowhide, and operated manually by foot or hand, providing a continuous and controlled blast of air. The rhythmic pumping of the bellows was essential for raising the internal temperature of the furnace to the required levels, 1,000 dars, 1200 Cardenas, and maintaining the reducing atmosphere necessary for the chemical reaction. The intense heat and the carbon monoxide produced by the burning charcoal chemically reduced the iron oxides in the ore, separating the iron from the oxygen. However, because the temperature was not high enough to melt the iron entirely, the product was a spongy, semi-solid mass of solid iron particles interspersed with molten slag, impurities from the ore, primarily silicates. This semi-molten, porous mass was known as the bloom. Once the smelting process was complete, which could take several hours or even a full day depending on the size of the furnace and the desired bloom, the bloom was extracted from the furnace. This was often a difficult and dangerous task, requiring specialized tools like long iron hooks or tongs to break open the furnace or extract the bloom from the top. The bloom, still glowing hot and weighing anywhere from a few kilograms to over 100, was then subjected to a laborious and physically demanding process of hammering and reheating known as rotting or consolidation. The bloom was repeatedly heated in a separate forge, a smaller open hearth with bellows, and then hammered vigorously with heavy stone or iron hammers on an anvil. This hammering served multiple critical purposes. It expelled the molten slag from the porous bloom, consolidating the iron into a denser, more coherent mass. It refined the iron, making it purer and stronger by aligning its crystalline structure, and it shaped the metal into usable forms, such as bars or billets, which could then be further worked into tools or weapons. The rhythmic clang of the smith's hammer, echoing through the settlement, would have been a constant and defining sound in Iron Age communities, a testament to the arduous work involved. The repeated heating and hammering also had another crucial effect. It introduced carbon into the outer layers of the iron from the charcoal in the forge. This process, known as carburization, transformed the surface of the iron into a form of steel, which is an alloy of iron and carbon. This accidental steeling, combined with quenching, rapid cooling of the hot metal in water or oil, could produce remarkably hard and durable edges for tools and weapons. The smiths learned through generations of trial and error how to manipulate these processes to achieve desired properties, observing the color of the hot metal. A dull red, cherry red, orange, or white heat each indicated different working properties and temperatures, the sparks it produced, and its response to the hammer. This intuitive understanding of metallurgy was passed down orally and through practical apprenticeship. Different types of iron and steel were produced for different purposes. Low-carbon iron, wrought iron, was softer and more malleable, suitable for general tools that needed to be bent or shaped, or for the body of a weapon. Higher carbon steel was harder and could hold a sharper edge, ideal for cutting tools, knives, and the edges of weapons. The development of pattern welding, particularly in later Iron Age Europe, represented a pinnacle of bloomery ironworking. This highly advanced technique involved forging together strips of different types of iron and steel, often alternating between high-carbon steel for hardness and low-carbon iron for flexibility, twisting them and then repeatedly folding and hammering them together. This created a composite blade with exceptional strength, flexibility, and a distinctive, beautiful, swirling pattern on the surface, reminiscent of wood grain. This technique not only improved the functionality of weapons, but also added an artistic and prestigious dimension, making such blades highly prized and often reserved for elite warriors. The tools of the smith included various hammers of different weights and shapes, tongs for holding hot metal, chisels for cutting, punches for making holes, and files for finishing. Now let us consider daily life in the Iron Age. For the vast majority of people, life revolved around agriculture, which was the bedrock of their existence. Iron tools revolutionized farming practices and significantly increased productivity. Iron plowshares, often tipped with iron, allowed for deeper and more efficient tilling of the soil, breaking up compacted earth and bringing nutrients to the surface, thereby increasing crop yields. This was particularly important in areas with heavy clay soils that were difficult to work with earlier tools. Iron sickles made harvesting crops faster and less laborious, allowing for larger areas to be cultivated and reducing the time needed for this crucial task. Iron axes facilitated the clearing of dense forests for new agricultural land and provided a steady supply of timber for construction, fuel, and various crafts. The primary crops cultivated included various grains like wheat, barley, and oats, along with legumes such as peas and beans. Crop rotation techniques, though perhaps not fully understood scientifically, were likely practiced to maintain soil fertility, perhaps by alternating grain crops with legumes that fix nitrogen. Food storage was crucial for survival through the lean winter months, with grains often stored in large ceramic vessels, or underground pits lined with clay or straw to protect them from pests and moisture. Animal husbandry was also crucial to the Iron Age economy and diet. Cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were raised for meat, milk, wool, and hides. Oxen were used as powerful draft animals for plowing and pulling carts, essential for heavy agricultural work and transport of goods. Horses were used for transport, riding, and in some regions for warfare, particularly with the advent of chariots. The management of livestock involved seasonal movements to pastures, careful grazing practices, and protection from predators. Animal products provided not only food, but also raw materials for clothing, tools, bone, and other necessities like tallow for lamps or fat for cooking. Housing varied regionally depending on available materials and cultural traditions, but generally consisted of timber-framed structures. In many parts of Europe, particularly the Celtic regions, roundhouses were common, constructed with a central post or posts supporting a conical roof, wattle and daub walls, a mixture of woven branches and clay mud, and thatched roofs made of straw or reeds. In other areas, rectangular houses were built, sometimes with multiple rooms or partitioned spaces. In some regions, stone was used for foundations or even entire structures, particularly where timber was scarce or for defensive purposes. Inside, homes would have been relatively simple, with a central hearth for cooking and warmth and a smoke hole in the roof to allow smoke to escape. Furniture would have been minimal, perhaps simple benches, sleeping platforms covered with animals, hides, and storage chests. The floor was typically earthen, sometimes covered with rushes or straw for insulation and comfort. Pottery production continued to be essential for daily life, providing vessels for storage, cooking, and serving food. Iron Age pottery often shows regional variations in style, form, and decoration, but its fundamental purpose remained the same. Pottery was typically hand-built in earlier phases using coiling or slab techniques, but the potter's wheel became more common in later periods, allowing for more standardized and finely made vessels. Firing was done in open bonfires or simple kilns, which could reach higher temperatures and provide more consistent results. Weaving was another vital domestic activity, producing textiles from wool or flax for clothing, blankets, and other household items. Simple upright looms were commonly used, and spindle whorls are frequently found at archaeological sites, indicating yarn production. Other crafts included woodworking for tools, furniture, and building, leather working for clothing, bags and straps, and bone carving for pins, needles, and small tools, all contributing to the self-sufficiency of communities. The diet of Iron Age people would have been largely based on cereals, such as wheat, barley, and oats, which formed the staple. This was supplemented by meat from domesticated animals and hunting, dairy products, and wild foods like berries, nuts, roots, and fish from rivers and coastal areas. Food preparation involved grinding grain into flour using quern stones, hand mills, baking bread in hearths or simple ovens, and cooking stews or porridges over the open hearth. Food preservation techniques were essential for surviving the lean winter months and included drying meat and fish, salting, and smoking. Evidence from skeletal remains found in burials provides insights into their health and diet, suggesting that life expectancy was relatively low. And common ailments included arthritis from hard physical labor, dental issues from coarse diets, and injuries from accidents or conflict. Malnutrition could also be a problem in times of poor harvest. Social structures in the Iron Age became increasingly complex and stratified. While kinship groups, extended families, and tribal affiliations remained important, there was a clear trend towards greater social differentiation and hierarchy. A warrior elite often emerged, distinguished by their wealth, their access to superior weaponry, often iron swords and armor, and their control over resources, land, and labor. This elite would have lived in larger, more elaborate dwellings, often within fortified settlements, and their burials often contained rich grave goods, symbolizing their status and power. These elites likely formed the ruling class, leading in warfare and administering justice. Below the elite were the common farmers and laborers who formed the backbone of society, producing the food and raw materials. Specialized artisans, such as smiths, potters, and jewelers, held important positions within their communities due to their valuable skills and the essential goods they produced. Their knowledge was often passed down through apprenticeships within families or guilds. There is also evidence of slavery in some Iron Age societies, particularly in later periods and in regions interacting with larger empires like Rome, where captives from warfare or individuals who fell into debt could be enslaved. Early forms of clientage, where less powerful individuals or groups pledged loyalty and service to a more powerful patron in exchange for protection or resources, also existed, forming complex networks of allegiance and obligation. Political organization varied from small, independent tribal groups led by chieftains to larger, more centralized confederations or early states, particularly evident in the Oppidan cultures. Decision-making might have involved assemblies of warriors or elders, but power increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few powerful families or individuals. Religion and belief systems were deeply integrated into daily life. Natural features like rivers, springs, lakes, bogs, and groves were often considered sacred places imbued with spiritual significance. Deities associated with fertility, war, the sun, the earth, and the natural world were worshipped. Rituals often involved offerings, sometimes of valuable objects, votive deposits of metalwork, pottery, or even human remains. Sometimes of animals, and in some instances, human sacrifice, particularly in times of crisis or for significant events, like harvests or battles. The Druids in Celtic societies, as mentioned, played a central and powerful role as religious leaders, judges, teachers, and keepers of oral traditions and knowledge. Their influence extended across political and social spheres, and they were revered for their wisdom and spiritual authority, often acting as intermediaries between the human and divine worlds. Art and symbolism in the Iron Age, particularly in Europe, moved towards more abstract and curvilinear forms as seen in the Latin style. Animal motifs, often highly stylized and sometimes composite creatures, were common. These artistic expressions were not merely decorative, they often carried deep symbolic meaning, reflecting beliefs about the natural world, the divine, the cosmos, and social status. The intricate patterns could also have served as protective charms, indicators of tribal identity, or expressions of spiritual power. The craftsmanship involved in creating these intricate pieces speaks volumes about the aesthetic values and technical skills of Iron Age societies. Trade and economy evolved significantly during the Iron Age. While local barter remained common for everyday exchanges, the increasing complexity of societies and the need for specialized goods led to more formalized and extensive trade networks. The emergence of coinage in later Iron Age Europe, often imitating Greek or Roman prototypes, indicates a shift towards more sophisticated economic systems, facilitating transactions and wealth accumulation. Trade routes both overland, following ancient tracts and river valleys, and maritime, along coasts and across seas, facilitated the exchange of raw materials, iron ore, salt, amber, furs, hides, timber, finished goods, pottery, metalwork, textiles, and agricultural products. The growth of Oppidan as economic hubs further stimulated trade and specialization, acting as centers for production, consumption, and redistribution of goods, drawing in resources from their hinterlands and exporting their own products. The end of the Iron Age is not a single, definitive point in time. In many parts of Europe, it gradually transitioned into the Roman period, as Roman expansion brought new administrative structures, technologies like concrete and advanced road building, and cultural influences. The Roman conquest often led to the decline of traditional Iron Age settlements and the rise of Roman towns and villas, fundamentally altering the social and economic landscape. Roman roads, laws, and coinage replaced indigenous systems in other regions, particularly those beyond the direct reach of the Roman Empire, like Ireland and parts of Scotland. The Iron Age continued for a longer period, evolving into early medieval periods with the continued use of iron, but within new political and social frameworks. The Iron Age did not end because iron became obsolete. Rather, it ended as societies continued to evolve, building upon the foundations laid during this transformative era, integrating iron technology into new and more complex civilizations. The legacy of the Iron Age is profound and far-reaching. It was the period that truly democratized metal tools. While bronze was often a luxury, requiring complex trade networks for its scarce components, iron, with its widespread availability, allowed for the widespread adoption of durable tools and weapons impacting agriculture, warfare, and daily life on an unprecedented scale. It laid the groundwork for the agricultural revolutions that would sustain larger populations, for the development of more complex states and empires, and for the technological advancements that would continue for millennia. The skills developed by Iron Age, smiths, the understanding of heat, hammering, the properties of metal, and the accidental and then intentional creation of steel were foundational to all subsequent metallurgy. These fundamental techniques were passed down through generations, forming the basis for later innovations in metalworking, from medieval blacksmithing to the Industrial Revolution. The social structures, trade networks, and cultural identities forged during this period continued to influence the course of history for centuries, shaping the very fabric of early medieval Europe and beyond. The Iron Age was not just about a new metal. It was about a new way of life, a new relationship with the environment, and a new trajectory for human civilization, a quiet but powerful revolution that continues to resonate in the very tools and structures of our modern world. As we conclude our long journey through the Iron Age, we are left with a deep appreciation for the ingenuity, resilience, and quiet determination of those who lived through this transformative era. Their legacy, though often unseen, continues to shape our world in countless subtle ways. The tools they forged, the fields they tilled, the societies they built, all contributed to the rich and complex tapestry of human history. May your rest be peaceful and your thoughts calm.